Let me start with a simple question. Do you believe you are more intelligent than your parents? What about your grandparents? For roughly 50 years, each new generation scored higher on intelligence tests than the one before it. The rise was not tiny or inconsistent. It appeared clearly across many countries, from the 1930s through the 1990s. A person born in 1980 was, on paper, likely to outperform their parents on the same kinds of tests. Researchers called this pattern the Flynn effect, and for decades it looked like one of the most dependable trends in cognitive science. Then the pattern changed. Around the mid-1990s, the upward line flattened. Soon after, it began moving in the opposite direction. Data gathered from more than 1 million people across several countries showed something researchers had not expected to see. Average scores were falling, and in some cases, the decline was large enough to be described as disturbing. A major Norwegian study published in 2018 followed more than 700,000 men over 3 decades and confirmed that the reversal was real. Another large American study examined around 400,000 people across 4 areas of cognition. 3 of those 4 areas were getting worse. By the end of this video, you will understand what may be pulling those scores down and why the same forces could be affecting you right now. There are 3 major drivers. The third makes the first 2 look like preparation, and something mentioned at the beginning will make much more sense once we reach the end. When researchers first confirmed the decline, one explanation spread quickly because it sounded simple and scientific. The idea was that highly intelligent people were having fewer children, while less educated groups were having more. Over generations, the argument claimed average intelligence would naturally fall. This became known as the dysgenics hypothesis. It sounded mathematical. It sounded cold, logical, and difficult to challenge. It appeared in articles, online arguments, and casual conversations. You may have heard some version of it before, but the Norwegian researchers tested the decline in a way that weakened that explanation dramatically. Instead of comparing unrelated families, they compared brothers. The brothers shared the same parents, the same home, much of the same DNA, the same neighborhood, and often the same routines. The key difference was the period in which each brother grew up. The younger brothers tended to score lower. That matters because it points away from genetics. If 2 brothers share the same family, and one scores lower mainly because he came of age later, then something outside the family must have changed. The environment changed. The same broad pattern appeared in Denmark, Finland, France, the Netherlands, Estonia, and several American studies. Imagine 2 plants from the same seed growing in the same pot. One sprouts later and receives less light. The seed is not the problem. The conditions are. So this decline is not mainly about who is having children with whom. It is about changes in the shared environment, especially after the 1970s, that appear to weaken the abilities these tests measure: abstract reasoning, working memory, processing speed, and the capacity to hold several ideas in mind at once. There are several suspects. You interact with at least 2 of them almost every day, and the first one is probably not what you expect. The abilities declining fastest are not random. They belong to a group of mental skills known as executive function. Executive function includes sustained attention, working memory, self-control, the ability to delay immediate rewards, and the capacity to reason clearly under pressure. These skills are not simply fixed at birth. They strengthen through repeated use, much like muscles. And one of the mental conditions that trains them has become increasingly rare in modern life. That condition is boredom. Not boredom as empty suffering, but the experience of staying with something difficult when an easier option is available. Reading a long argument all the way through. Sitting with a problem instead of escaping it. Following one idea to its conclusion rather than jumping to the next distraction. Research tracking tens of thousands of people found that the average time spent focused on one screen before switching dropped sharply over the past 2 decades. What once lasted minutes now often lasts less than a minute. This does not necessarily mean people suddenly became less capable. It means the environment stopped demanding long periods of concentration. Apps, feeds, notifications, and platforms are designed to interrupt attention. Interruption keeps people engaged, engagement keeps them scrolling, and scrolling produces profit. The commercial model and the mental cost are tied together. Now think again about the Norwegian brothers. They may have grown up in the same house, but the younger brother entered adulthood in a world with more digital interruption, more fragmented information, more passive consumption, and fewer hours of deep, uninterrupted thought. The seed stayed the same. The light changed. The attention environment may be one of the strongest forces behind the decline, but it is not acting alone. The second suspect comes from nutrition, and part of it changed quietly. For much of the 20th century, commercial bread in the United States and Europe often used iodine-based dough conditioners. Iodine supports thyroid function, and thyroid health plays an important role in brain development, especially during pregnancy and childhood. Improvements in nutrition, including access to iodine, closely match the earlier rise in cognitive scores. Then, manufacturers began replacing iodine-based conditioners with bromine-based alternatives during the 1970s and 1980s. A deficiency that many people assumed had been solved started appearing again in parts of the population. Severe iodine deficiency is known to harm cognitive development. In wealthier countries, the average effect may be smaller, but it is still measurable. Many people may have grown up with lower iodine exposure than the generation before them without ever knowing it. Chemical exposure matters too. Leaded aviation fuel remained in use for decades, and researchers have linked exposure near smaller airports to measurable cognitive losses across entire birth groups. So far, we have three overlapping pressures: a weaker attention environment, changes in nutrition, and harmful chemical exposure. Each could affect cognition. Together, they may explain part of the decline, but even these forces do not fully explain what appears when the falling human scores are placed beside another trend, one that has been rising rapidly since around 2015. That comparison is where the real story begins. Return to the opening idea. For decades, every generation appeared to score higher than the one before it. Then, the trend reversed. But the decline is not equal across every mental ability. The fastest losses appear in a particular cluster, reasoning through difficult problems, keeping several pieces of information active at once, maintaining attention, and thinking clearly under pressure. Those are not minor skills. They are among the most demanding abilities the human brain developed. They are what allow us to sit with complexity, reject the obvious answer, and work towards a better one. And those are also the areas in which artificial intelligence has improved most rapidly since about 2015. We have measured human cognitive performance for nearly a century. We have measured modern AI performance for only a small part of that time. Yet when the two trends are placed beside each other, the contrast is difficult to ignore. One line is falling, the other is rising. The tests are not identical, and researchers are right to point that out. Human intelligence and machine performance are not the same thing. But the overlap in the abilities being measured is still important. Both involve memory, attention, reasoning, problem-solving, and performance under pressure. That does not prove AI is causing the decline. It does reveal something more uncomfortable. The exact abilities becoming weaker in humans are becoming stronger in machines. Now comes the part that changes the meaning of everything before it. The reverse Flynn effect appears to be environmental. It is not fixed in our genes, and that means it may not be permanent. The Norwegian brothers are important because they show that the difference can emerge within the same family. The younger brother was not born from a different genetic line. He grew up in a different world. If the conditions changed, then the conditions can change again. No earlier generation had the ability to watch this decline unfold in real time. The researchers who first described the Flynn effect did not know the rise would stop. The researchers who confirmed the reversal could not have known how quickly AI would improve on many of the same cognitive tasks. But you are living at the point where both lines are visible. You can see human performance falling in some areas, while machine performance rises in those same areas. And you are seeing it at a moment when the decline still appears reversible. That makes the real question bigger than whether people are becoming less intelligent. The real question is whether the human line rises again, and whether you become part of the recovery or part of the pattern. Research on improving cognition points towards conditions that are almost the opposite of modern distraction: sustained attention, deep reading, uninterrupted problem-solving, physical health, good nutrition, sleep, and the willingness to remain with difficulty instead of escaping it. The line is not destiny. The window is still open, and this generation may be the first one with enough evidence to understand both the danger and the opportunity at the same time. You now know the decline exists. You know it is shaped by the environment, and because the environment can be changed, the ending has not been decided yet. This is Vespers. The question is not whether the trend is real. The question is what you will do now that you can see it.